Hi there, and welcome back to the Kinetic Edge. So today we'll be discussing exercises for high blood pressure. Now, you may be watching this because you've been diagnosed with high blood pressure and you want to know what to do about it. You may know that high blood pressure runs in your family and you want to know how to prevent it, or you may just have a general curiosity for the subject. Either way, I think that this video will prove very useful for any of those three factors, as it's all been based on scientific evidence. Now, before we delve into some solutions, let's just have a quick overview of the problem. So basically, simplified down to its base roots, high blood pressure is usually due to the heart struggling to pump blood through its arteries. So it increases the pressure in order to make sure the blood reaches its destination. Now, while this is effective in maintaining homeostasis, it does mean that there's extra pressure put on the arterial walls of your arteries. So any extra pressure could lead to damage over time, and that damage, of course, can lead to an increased risk of a heart attack or stroke. The first exercise is not recommended if it is a severe case of high blood pressure. Only if it's the first initial indication of high blood pressure or you're trying to prevent it, because it's high intensity interval training. So this can raise your heart rate to its final heart rate zone, which is quite intense. It will probably raise it near to its maximum heart rate. That's usually the idea for this kind of training. Unfortunately though, it is the best training to prevent high blood pressure because it leads to the expansion of all the blood vessels, and this expansion and this dilation effect eventually clears all residual tissue, any calcification, anything that could be causing a blockage, thereby improving circulation, and therefore the blood pressure goes down because blood is flowing more freely. So high intensity interval training, anything that is short in duration and very intense, like sprints or circuit training. Any group classes at the gym that do like functional fitness would count as this. So yes, steady state cardio, running on the treadmill, taking a jog. It's not necessarily the best idea because it doesn't raise your heart rate high enough in order to have this kind of recovery effect and expansion of the blood vessels. So the next one is fortunately better for all people involved, including those with a severe diagnosis. So weightlifting, no rocket science here. The increased blood flow to the muscles expands and dilates the local capillaries and also the local blood vessels that supply the muscle. So over time, this habitual temporary increase in blood flow to the muscles eventually leads to a longer dilation effect of the local capillaries and blood flow, which eventually decreases overall blood pressure. To be more specific, for blood flow purposes, you don't want to be lifting too heavy weights, so it's not strength training here. We're going for high reps, low weight. Bodybuilders, before a competition or show, when they want to get lots of blood pumping to their muscles to look fuller, they often do same kind of light weights, high rep ranges for their weightlifting. So you can really go quite light on it, even all the way up to 20 to 30 reps for a particular weight, and that actually increases the amount of blood flow that goes to the muscles. There is fortunately an alternative though for people who do not like the idea of picking up heavy things and putting them down, and that is yoga. So yoga or intensive stretching. So any kind of stretching to a muscle actually helps to almost have like a reflex response called a Golgi tendon reflex that eventually initiates kind of increased blood flow to the area to make sure that it's supple enough to actually move and respond if there happens to be any hyperextension at a particular joint. So yeah, you can capitalize on this. So by stretching the outer fascia, which is the outer casing of a muscle, which is basically any kind of stretching routine. Doesn't really matter what you do. It can be static stretching, it can be dynamic stretching, it can be a combination of both, like in yoga. Just any kind of stretching routine, mobility routine would probably have the same effect. Now, of course, I would recommend yoga because the sessions are quite long, about 45 minutes. You probably do need to be doing it for quite a long time in order to get the eventual effect of increasing circulation and blood flow. Now, obviously, these exercises mean nothing if you don't solve the root problem. So there's a bonus tip here, which is nutritionally based. So the root problem, of course, is that there is some clogging of an artery, and that usually happens from calcification of some kind of mineral or some kind of macronutrient that kind of calcifies into the arterial wall, and then this actually decreases the diameter of the lumen of that particular artery. So as soon as the lumen kind of starts closing in on itself, the blood pressure goes up, because as you know, probably from physics, as soon as the diameter of a pipe or something closes, the pressure of that pipe and the water inside of it or whatever the liquid is goes up as well. So yeah, we want to avoid that calcification of deposits. Now there are two main types of deposits that you usually find within people that are diagnosed with high blood pressure, and that is calcium deposits. So calcium, unfortunately, if taken in high quantities and not deposited into bones, the excess sometimes ends up calcifying on arterial walls. There is something we can do about that, fortunately, and that is a vitamin called K2. Now, vitamin K2 actually acts as kind of a transporting molecule that takes in calcium and deposits it into bone, into the bone matrix. Now, even if the bone matrix doesn't need it, it still recycles it from there. So it doesn't eventually end up calcifying on the arterial walls. So if you take a calcium supplement, it's probably best to combine that with vitamin K2. So take vitamin K2 regardless if you have been diagnosed with high blood pressure, as it may be part of the reason it is actually a problem. The second one, which is a bit more obvious, is saturated fats. Now, saturated fats, unfortunately, tend to mix in with blood plasma, which makes the blood actually thicker in viscosity, so its thickness, it's more like more honey than water for analogy. And that unfortunately sometimes ends up in that becoming so thick that it actually calcifies and again gets stuck on an arterial wall, thereby clogging up that lumen, increasing the blood pressure. So another main tip would be to avoid saturated fats. Not entirely, of course, that's near to impossible, I guess, if you eat a well-balanced diet. Just minimize it as much as you can. Now, of course, the main contributors to saturated fats are animal products, so your dairy and all your meats, unfortunately. Obviously, lean meats are better because they have a lower fat content, but they still have it quite substantially. Another one to look out for is probably also coconut milk. So coconut milk, coconut cream. So not all your plant-based things are actually super healthy. Coconut cream, coconut milk, that kind of stuff also is quite high in saturated fat. So you do have to do a bit of your research to understand what does have high saturated fat content and what doesn't. But yeah, if you could follow these two things, take a vitamin K2 supplement and avoid saturated fats as much as you can, you would be in good stead to reversing that calcification problem. And hopefully over time, the whole root problem solves itself eventually. So you won't need medication or these exercises to increase your circulation, because the whole root problem or root cause would be done away with. I've compiled a summary of the things that you can do to hopefully reverse this condition without the need for medication. Now, of course, you don't need to do all of them, but the more you do, I guess, the better your likelihood is of making an impact. So, first one, of course, sprints. Now, if you're healthy enough and you don't have any underlying heart conditions or respiratory problems and additional things, and your diagnosis is relatively early, sprints, probably the best thing you can do. Second thing, so low weights, high rep, resistance training. Again, trying to get that bodybuilder pump going, 20 to 30 reps. It's quite a high range. People will probably look at you funny at the gym, but it's the best thing you can do for blood flow. Third thing would be to take a yoga class. So it'll be a nice extramural for you as well. So if your gym has a local yoga class, it'll be a good idea to join in on that. Lots of health benefits as well, mental especially actually. So definitely worth your time. And last thing, nutritionally, take a vitamin K2 supplement. They're quite cheap. You can find them pretty much everywhere, and it will be well worth your while. And again, avoid saturated fat as much as you can. I hope some of these tips are at least new to you and were useful, and I hope that I've explained it thoroughly enough so that you understand why I have found that these were definitely the best rules to follow. Hope to see you next time.